Today we're looking at top 10 2000s motorcycles. These are some of the most interesting, culturally significant, and best motorcycles of the era. Logan, I don't know about you, but I love 2000s motorcycles.
I mean, I love 2000s anything, you know, Y2K, Attitude Era, pretty sick stuff.
Yeah, Y2K, I mean, everything was a little bit more extreme and kind of crazy in the 2000s, and I think the motorcycles reflected that too. So in today's video, we're gonna rank them from sort of least culturally significant to what we believe, number one, the all-time most significant motorcycle of the 2000s. Let's begin with number 10. All right, number 10 on the list is the Harley-Davidson Sportster 1200. Logan, you're a Sportster 883 enjoyer, a Sportster lover in general. Why did we put this bike as number 10?
Well, the Sportster's got to make the list because not only was it a lot of people's first introduction to Harley-Davidson, but it was their first introduction to motorcycles in general. You know, if you wanted a cruiser, you could get a Sportster or something like a Honda Shadow, God forbid a Honda Rebel. But a Sportster 1200, it's a real bike. It's a solid bike. It's got substance. It's got heft. And as far as Harley-Davidson pricing goes, it's pretty accessibly priced.
Yeah, this is one of those motorcycles that was made from 88 to 2020, largely unchanged. I mean, we went from carburetors to fuel injected, rigid mount to rubber mount, but on the whole, it's a bit of a time capsule bike, and in the 2000s, this was a cool Harley-Davidson to own.
Yeah, and if my metrics are correct, they sold like over 1 million of these bad boys.
That's kind of a lot, honestly. That's way more than I thought.
Yeah. You know, the Sportster 1200, it's kind of like a masochist bike, right? You know, you're bullied by Harley owners, you're bullied by sport bike riders, you're bullied by your girlfriend. But I mean, they're lovable. There's a reason they sold so many of these. It's got a good amount of torque. It's a cool looking bike, timeless, retro, inspired tons of different people to start riding, and you can't fault its importance for sure.
Yeah, the Sportster is certainly an important motorcycle, and I think we do have to doff our cap a little bit to it. Let's move on to number 9. All right, number 9 on the list today is one that you may disagree with us a little bit, but it's the Kawasaki ZX-6R, the lovable stunt motorcycle that so many people loved from this era. From 2003 to 2006, Kawasaki made this cheater 600cc engine that was a 636cc displacement. It was a little bit comfortable, it was a little bit nice to ride, and people really enjoyed these, and I really don't think we can overstate how important this motorcycle was.
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of blurred the lines between track bike and street bike, you know what I mean? Like if you think about what's happening now and the not so super sport thing, like the ZX-6R was kind of doing that like 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was one of those motorcycles that kind of set the tone for what we see nowadays, and funny enough, Kawasaki actually still makes the ZX-6 today, but it had a really kind of a long period of not making it from about 2006 to 2013. So it's a super sport machine, a little bit more comfortable, kind of value driven, but it was a motorcycle that really defined the time. You can think of the ZX-6 as a 600 with an extra chromosome. Logan, I think we can correlate the popularity of the ZX-6R to Monster energy drink sales in that time frame as well.
That's a very apt observation.
Thank you. I thought of it myself. Moving on to number 8 on our list today is, of course, the Suzuki DR-Z400S, a motorcycle that even if you don't ride the DR-Z400, I guarantee you know something esoteric about it.
Yeah, you know, I don't own a DR-Z, but I could tell you a step-by-step process on how to do the 3x3 airbox mod. So that's telling you something.
Yeah, it's one of those motorcycles that has incredible cultural cachet simply because of the people that owned and loved them. Suzuki made this motorcycle for 25 years unchanged. Literally last year was when we got an update to this motorcycle, and guess what? It still has a 5-speed gearbox, so it's still an old school machine. So the users of this motorcycle, they went online, the forum proliferation of this bike, they really just had a complete dissection of this motorcycle, and if it's a bike that you want to get into to highly modify, the DR-Z is going to be your best bet.
Yeah, and it's no question why the DR-Z is so popular. You know, you can commute, go off-road, do wheelies, stunt around town, and if something breaks, you can fix it for like $5 with parts from the hardware store.
And as I mentioned, this bike ran for over 20 years unchanged, and the graphics pack was so bold that you kind of started to forget it only shipped with the 5-speed gearbox. Moving on to number 7, this is a motorcycle that really changed the fortune of the company that was making it. It is, of course, the Triumph Bonneville. This was a motorcycle that kind of kick-started the new cafe racer craze in the 2000s. You really started seeing people harken back to the 60s, and boomers started fetishizing Steve McQueen, and it kind of continues on to this day, Logan.
Yeah, you know, when you think about it, like today, modern classic's a pretty ubiquitous term. but in the 2000s, it had a lot of novelty. You know, a bike with kind of 1960s aesthetic with modern components, that's a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, and so the Bonneville in the mid-2000s came equipped with that 865cc parallel twin. It was carbureted, but again, it really kickstarted the new modern classic craze. Ducati then launched their Scrambler. We started seeing a bunch of cafe racer models from different companies, and now Triumph makes like 10 different Bonneville bikes. You got the Bobber, the Scrambler XE. I mean, so many different models proliferated from this bike that I really think we had to rank it up towards 7, because before the Bonneville, you didn't really have this. All right, next up on the list is a motorcycle that is responsible for the financial success of the company that made it as well. It's, of course, the Monster 620 from Ducati. Logan, tell us about this motorcycle.
Yeah, so the Monster is important in a bunch of different ways. One, think about all the races Ducati wouldn't have won if they weren't printing money with the Monster.
It's true.
Secondly, think about all the other bikes that wouldn't exist from other manufacturers if it weren't for the Monster. Before the Monster, there was like sport bikes and cruisers. It wasn't until the Monster came out that you had this kind of raw, stripped down, naked bike that we've come to know them as.
Yeah, and the 620 specifically was the entry point to Ducati. Ducati was able to be both a luxury brand and a high volume seller of these motorcycles. It's kind of similar to Porsche's strategy from way back when, where they figured out that they could sell soccer mom vehicles like the Cayenne and the Macan to then fund their GT programs. Ducati pretty much did the same thing, but even earlier. They were like, wait a minute, we can sell sort of entry-level approachable naked bikes, get people in the Ducati pipeline, and then sell them a V4 later on in the product lineup.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the Ducati Monster, specifically the 620, like Ducati wouldn't be the household name it is today.
Definitely not. You can think of the Ducati Monster as an SV650 with daddy issues and an eyebrow ring. All right, Logan, kick us off for number 5. What do we got?
For number 5, R1150 GS. Ever heard of it?
No, I never have.
Well, let me tell you. So you're familiar with this documentary series called The Long Way Round?
Yeah, with a certain Jedi guy and then his fun British sidekick,
yeah,
right?
The quad lock rep.
Yeah, the quad lock rep, that's
yeah,
right.
So jokes aside, R1150 GS, even though you can make fun of GS owners, GS riders all you want, this is a super important bike, especially for the 2000s. It really kind of pioneered the do-it-all Swiss Army knife adventure bike that now is so commonplace.
Yeah, without the R1150 GS, you really wouldn't have the amount of different adventure bikes you have today. I mean, that combined with the long way around, I mean, it really was a cultural moment. And the crazy part is, this bike kind of has a legendary status because in the documentary, KTM was actually going to be the brand that they were going to use, but they backed out last minute, and then BMW stepped up and took over. And Logan, look what happened since then.
Look what happened since then. You can almost say the writing was on the wall.
That's right. Writing was on the wall for KTM at that point. They really, I mean, we would probably live in a totally different world if KTM had actually stepped up and been in that documentary.
It makes my spine chill.
They'd actually be profitable right now. Insane.
And what's cool about the 1150 GS, you know, versus the 1250 or the 1300 GS now is it still was kind of a heritage model. It had the air-cooled boxer engine. They weren't like reverse engineering a spaceship around a boxer engine to kind of give it the allure of heritage or nostalgia. Like, this was a kind of heritage flagship bike.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, this is also a motorcycle that's just kind of been orbiting Logan's sphere. It seems to be edging closer and closer to joining your stable.
Yeah, I keep kind of talking about it like tangentially, and then to the point where now I'm talking about it like once a day, and they're like popping up on Facebook Marketplace. Like, the algorithm is haunting me with these like pristine boomer-owned like yellow 1150 GSs. So if I buy one, probably won't end up on the channel because no one will watch the videos, but you might see.
It'll end up on the channel.
Might see one pop around. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah. All right, Logan, hit us with number 4, most important bike of the 2000s.
Number 4, most important, but the S1000. Wait a second. Gixxer Thou.
Gixxer Thou, the K5 specifically. The Gixxer of Gixxers, the most squiggly motorcycle known to man.
I mean, it created a cultural movement.
Literally.
Yeah, if it weren't for this bike, you know, you wouldn't be able to set lap times on the way to meet with your probation officer.
And that's pretty impressive. So the K5 Gixxer, if you don't know, it was from a time when leader bikes were changing quite a bit. They were getting lighter, they were getting faster, they were getting more extreme. And the K5 really came out and just blew everybody away. It had 175 horsepower, it was super lightweight, and could just tear up any track at any time. It was actually so good that BMW looked at the K5 Gixxer and said, you know what, we don't have to develop a whole brand new super bike. let's just copy the K5 Gixxer and release the S1000RR. That's a true story,
Yeah,
Logan.
Suzuki already did all the work for them.
That's right, and it's kind of ironic when you think about the Germans copying the Japanese, and there's some sort of World War II joke in the middle there. I just can't suss it out.
But you know what they say, work smarter, not harder. I'd be doing the same thing.
The K5 Gixxer also played a star role in some of the most prehistoric YouTube videos that you can still find nowadays. You know the ones I'm talking about, the square format, the crazy editing, the guy just doing wheelies on the highway, the butt rock blaring. Some of the most iconic bits of cultural information have come from the K5 Gixxer.
Yeah, and you know, it really just did a ton to redefine the leader bike class, crazy powered weight ratios, you know. I think the leader bike industry wouldn't be the same without the K5 Gixxer.
I think you could say that. All right, Logan, podium places. What's number 3?
Podium place in the 3rd position.
Ooh.
YZF-R6, and that's its legal name if you didn't know. I know everyone calls it the R6. The R6, YZF-R6. Get it right.
That's the government name for the motorcycle. What can we say about the R6? I mean, we had to place this motorcycle very high up on the list because there's been seldom a motorcycle that comes along in history that does as much to the zeitgeist as the R6 has done. Think back to the RPM scandal of this motorcycle when it thought it could rev to 17,500 RPM. It turns out it was only 16,000 RPM. It's the motorcycle that your buddy always says can do 186 miles per hour on the highway when we all know they top out at about $150 or so. It's a bike that literally screams performance without ever being turned on, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, and say what you will, you know, most winning 600 in history, it's pretty universally known in like sanctioned events, club races, everything. Like the amount of
even unsanctioned night races.
Unsanctioned. Well, I was getting to that too. So the racetrack or the highway roll racing, the R6 is kind of hard to contest its prowess.
It's also the bike that is standing firm against the new generation super sports without even being in production currently.
Wait. You can buy a track-only model, and I think it's pretty cheap to turn street legal, no?
Something like 20 grand, something like that. Totally worth it for a 600, right?
Chump change.
Easy peasy money. So the R6, it's still standing firm against these new generation super sports, and it's one of those bikes where when people have them, they say, nothing's as good as my R6. So for that reason, since the 2000s, it's been a motorcycle that's just been nonstop in the zeitgeist. And honestly, Logan, I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I think it's firmly cemented itself in motorcycle culture, motorcycle history, and I don't think these 16-year-olds online are gonna stop talking about it anytime soon.
That's right. Every kid I see on YouTube always says they're saving up for their R6, and they can't all be wrong.
Yeah, and as they keep saving the money, the prices of used R6 just keep going up. So, you know, it's maybe like me owning a house one day.
All right, boys, we're getting to the hitters here. Number 2 of the most important 2000s motorcycle. What do we got, Logan?
We got the Suzuki SV650.
Yeah, that's really hard to argue with, honestly. The SV650's impact cannot be understated.
Yeah, completely. I mean, think about the amount of people that got riding motorcycles, the amount of people that got into riding, doing track days. Its usability, its affordability. It's like a bike people aren't afraid to actually ride, aren't afraid to beat on it. Like, I think that sort of confidence-inspiring nature is an important part of this bike.
Yeah, and you could say that it's a copycat Ducati and it's just some cheapo Ducati, but they kind of did it better. It's really reliable, it's fun to use, and in a way, Logan, now that I think about it, it's kind of like a new, not so super sport machine, but just from a bygone era.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely was an early forefront into like 2-cylinder engines, torque forward, lots of fun, but like that smooth linear power. Not a ton of people had done it prior to that.
Yeah, and it's a motorcycle that I think still has relevance today. I don't know if Suzuki is still making them. The last time I checked on the website, the last model year for a brand new SV650 was 23, so they actually might have just started axing them since they did the GSX-S, which is kind of a shame, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, still, there's plenty of used SV650s floating around. And they probably will be for another 20 years. And it's never going to be a bad buy. You're never going to have a bad time on it. There's definitely a reason, it's earned the number 2 spot.
It's going to be weird to think one day of like a 20-year-old Suzuki SV650 is like a 2017 Suzuki SV650, you know? But it'll probably still be running just fine. And now, without further ado, and with a drum roll, please, number 1, most important 2000s.
Turbo boost.
Whoa! Ninja 250.
Did we just rustle some feathers?
Maybe. The Ninja 250, of course, is the one that we chose to be ranked as the #1 most important 2000s motorcycle. Logan, why is that?
I mean, just think about, how many people got into riding sport bikes or the idea of sport bikes. I don't know about you, but I had like multiple friends whose older brothers had Ninja 250s in the garage. When you're a kid and you see that lime green Ninja, that Ninja airbrush font, you just think it's the coolest thing ever. You don't know that's just a 250. And I think compared to the alternative, which is, a Rebel 250, I'm always gonna go with the Ninja for sure.
It's a motorcycle that to me kind of has no equal in terms of how many people got started riding a Ninja 250 and how it defined that time frame of like people thought of like 250s, 600s, and 1000s, right? Yeah. And some people who are a little old school still have that mindset of like that's your power progression ladder. And it's hard to believe that there was a point where people would they could look at a Ninja 250 or I guess a ZX-6 and they were like, oh, I have to pick which one's gonna be my starter motorcycle here in North America. And they're like so crazy different, you know what I mean? I actually remember a time when I was in high school in sort of the late 2000s where you could look on Craigslist and find Ninja 250s for like 700 bucks. Totally serviceable, easy running motorcycles. I know that's hard to believe for you young folks out there right now that $700 would get you a reasonable motorcycle, not a clapped out piece of crap, but that's how it was back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, imagine working a summer job at Pizza Hut and being able to afford to buy a Kawasaki Ninja. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, just like outright, Yeah, I mean, minimum wage hasn't moved much since back then, so I guess it's the same nowadays too. So the Ninja 250 has to be the most important motorcycle of the 2000s. I think given how many people started riding on them, given its impact, given how many were sold, and how it kind of was so genre defining. It ran unchanged for like 20 years until we started seeing beginner bikes start to get bigger in the early 2010s. But Logan, I think there's a motorcycle that perhaps sits above all of these, sort of a zero position, an S-tier motorcycle of the 2000s. Do you know what I'm gonna say?
Grom?
Grom came out in 2014, I think. That could be one of the greatest bikes of the 2010s. But no, Hayabusa, dude, come on.
Hayabusa, yeah, I mean, I guess you could think of that, but for me, the Hayabusa just screams like 1999.
Specifically, it's just that 1 year.
It was an important year culturally. A lot of, things happening in the world. Everyone was afraid of an uncertain future, so they were ready to yeet themselves on a Busa instead.
Yeah, I think the Busa's grotesque lines really mirrors like stuff like The Matrix and Fight Club and Fisheye Lens and just like kind of grotesque weird things. And maybe I was like right at the tail end of that like weird new metal phase that everyone went through until we got into the 2000s of these proper motorcycles.
Yeah, and I think if you can garner anything from this list, it's mass appeal, approachability. Those are the things that led to like incredibly popular genre-defying motorcycles. Yeah, Gixxer starter bike.
I think the other thing to think about too is we have never gone back to the level of sales of motorcycles from the mid-2000s. If you look at like overall volume, it's never gone back to that point. Like mid-2000s up until the financial recession was like literally the greatest time for motorcycling in human history. And we've never gone back to it. And I think these motorcycles reflect it, to be honest.
Yeah,
that was our peak.
I think that's a fair assessment for sure.
Yeah. All right, boys, that's our list of 2000s motorcycles ranked. Let us know if you agree with any of these choices or where you would place them if you had your way. Drop us a comment down below. We appreciate you checking out today's video. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later. Wake up! You're dreaming! You're dreaming! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! None of this is real! None of it's real! None of it's real! Wake up! Keep watching Amy Noob.